So hello and welcome to Tech TV, brought to you by London Tech Week. I'm really pleased to have with us today Dennis Bonilla, Dean of the Global mthree Training Academy, who is responsible for preparing emerging talent for the world of work and also reskilling employees. His experience spans both the academic and corporate world. This includes senior roles at the likes of Oracle and Microsoft, as well as the University of Phoenix, where he spent 5 years as Executive Dean of the College of Information Systems and Technology. Dennis is also a US Navy nuclear submarine veteran and a licensed aviator. So today, we're here to discuss the digital skills gap in a post-pandemic world and his opinion on the current challenges and solutions in education technology. So the World Economic Forum has estimated that 54% of workers will need significant digital reskilling by 2022. And so supplying staff with that training now to advance their skill set is going to be a really great way to bridge that gap. So I'm really looking forward to Dennis sharing his views on the matter. Thanks for joining me and the London Tech Week community today online, Dennis.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon, everybody.
So to start off, could you tell us a bit about how you came to join mthree?
Sure. So I've been in learning and development and unlocking human potential my entire career. In the Navy, after college, I served as a training officer on my submarine, and then went into curriculum development, delivery, instruction in the power industry, and taught all around the world for Westinghouse. Then I moved to technology, went to medical, went to dental, went back to technology, but always around unlocking human potential. When I left the University of Phoenix, I did 2 years of consulting for Fortune 100 companies in terms of digital learning transformation. And I got approached by executives at Wiley on what their vision was, on what they were trying to do to integrate a variety of companies that they had purchased into one global academy. And I found it very exciting, right in my wheelhouse, things that I love to do. And most importantly, I really enjoyed the people that I interviewed with, the people that were on the team, the people I will be working for and working with. They were very authentic, transparent. They really cared about learning. And I said, sure, I love it. Let's do it. So that's how I got there 6 months ago.
Oh, that's an eclectic mix of roles to start with, but it also really sounds like you found your people, which is really important, definitely. So the COVID-19 crisis has provided a nudge for many people to use digital technologies for the first time. What are some of the challenges presented by this technological innovation?
Well, I would call it more than a nudge. I would call it almost a 2x4 to the head, right? Because many companies had plans to transform to digital learning and digital technologies, except they had it in a 3 to 5 year time span. And then all of a sudden on a Friday in March of 2020, they all realized we need to accelerate that time frame from 3 to 5 years to 2 to 3 days or 2 to 3 weeks. And the beauty was that people realized that that transformation could be done quickly, and they had to do it because of survival, right? Everybody had to figure out, how do I keep my business going? How do I keep my teams working? How do I ensure that we continue any momentum we had before the COVID crisis hit? And in fact, many people had already infrastructure plans in place to be able to do that. And so what they did is they worked with their IT departments and with the other parts of the company to all collaborate very, intensely around getting this done because of survival. And there was less resistance to change, because usually people say, oh, it'll take longer. I want to take longer to do that. No, it was, we need to do this now. It doesn't need to be perfect. And I think that was the big thing, right? Everybody thinks, oh, it has to be perfect. No, let's transition. Let's get 80% there, and we can then continue to improve and make it better over time. And that's what they did. And the results have been, from a learning perspective, moving from face-to-face to this sort of blended hybrid virtual model has worked very well, and they've continued to improve on it. But it's presented challenges in other areas, especially in K through 12 education, places where maybe they didn't have the resources to be able to make that transition quickly. A lot of schools stumbled. A lot of schools didn't have a great experience for the students. A lot of schools didn't have the money to do it. And so I think there are some long-term effects that are going to happen downstream from that transition for those that weren't able to do it successfully quickly, because either the lack of funds or lack of technology and other sort of barriers that prevented them from doing a quick transition.
That's so true. There's such a disparity between how office capabilities and switching to digital versus what schools and colleges could do. I don't think that's actually been spoken about enough. So that's really interesting. And since the pandemic, the digital divide has become the new face of inequality. And this is a crucial time to equip people with those digital skills to prevent that social exclusion that people are noticing. How can organizations, in your view, tackle the skills gap?
Well, there's a couple of different ways of doing it. I think what is brought out is the inequality of access, right? So, if you don't have access to those digital technologies, either through broadband access or through equipment or through facilitation and things that can get you there, that's just going to continue to push a divide that already existed before the pandemic. I mean, we all know there are the haves and the have-nots. There are people with access and people without. There are, poor school districts and poor places in the world that don't have that capability, that then that divide just continue to be exacerbated. And, the crisis just made that come to front and center and say, we can't continue this divide and expect a recovery in a future that's equal and has social equity and social justice for everybody. So companies, have taken on a variety of different initiatives. Obviously, there's tons of initiatives that are going around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and racial justice and social justice. And then I think companies are beginning to understand that they have to take accountability for providing abilities for their employees to learn these digital skills, even though maybe their job description doesn't include digital skills in their job description. So I think employees have to look at, it's not just bringing in external talent. A lot of times people think, I'll just bring in new talent that has those skills, as opposed to looking at the people they have internally and how do I reskill them, give them the ability to develop, because they've already been in the culture, they've already been loyal employees, they've already given a lot to the company. Let's figure out how we can get those people reskilled, repivoted into different roles, or provide them with the education and professional development opportunities to actually develop those digital skills. Because in the future, digital skills will be the entry-level currency. If you don't have those, you're not really going to be relevant in the workplace. So you have to give people the opportunity internally and also bring in some new blood.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is a nice point that we can segue into talking about the learning philosophy behind the mthree Academy and how are mthree doing things differently?
Well, we could spend days talking about how we're doing things differently. I will tell you that my time in academia and my time at the University of Phoenix, which, by the way, was a pioneer in online learning, the first university globally to have an online learning program 20 years ago. So over that time, we have perfected what online learning is. But most importantly, we've also perfected the adult learner. How does the adult learner really learn and do best, right? We know that there's a pedagogy associated with how kids learn, and the K-12 system is based on how do kids learn. But adults are motivated very differently. They learn differently. They have different types of reinforcements. They have different types of motivation. And so we focus on the adult learner and the theory behind how adults learn. We focus on various types of motivations and assessments that allow us to really understand what do they already know and what do they need to close that gap. And we focus on what I would call very exceptional instructional design. So we combine our subject matter experts in technology with experts in adult learning and cognitive theory, how the brain works, how adults learn, how do you do those practices and exercises to sort of build on that. And our model is really one about learn, practice, apply, and develop and continue to grow. So when people come to the Academy, maybe people don't realize it, but they're our employees. They're not just somebody who's sort of passing through, getting trained, and then is going to go to somewhere else to be employed. There are employees throughout the Academy, and they stay our employees for the first 2 years after they graduate from the Academy, even though they may be working at a customer site. So we focus on not only excellence in the Academy, but also how do we continue to develop their skills over those 2 years while they're still our employees, so they continue to be relevant, they continue to be practicing and applying the things they need. And then I think another, I don't want to say it's a secret sauce, but things that many people probably don't understand when they're just doing education for education, but not on a sort of what I would call a formal basis, is the importance of professional business skills in addition to the technical skills. So we embed those things in everything we do: communication, critical thinking, creativity, innovation, solving problems. all the agility, all the things that will make them relevant, not just in the technical skills they're learning, but make them relevant throughout their entire career, because those are skills that never go away. They're always needed. And so we try to embed all those outcomes in everything we do in addition to the technical skills.
Yeah, I think that combination of both hard skills and soft skills is so integral, and often the soft skills sometimes get overlooked. So I think that's really important that you brought it into the conversation there. So with new environments, you obviously need new expertise. In your view, we kind of touched upon it, but what are the limitations of that traditional academic learning space? And can you talk a little bit about blended learning? Because I've seen you mention it in kind of articles and speak about it before, so it'd be great to talk about that.
Sure. So I'll talk about blended learning first, because one of the underlying approaches that we have at the Academy is a concept that I call BARE, B-A-R-E. And that includes blended learning, agility, relevancy, and experiential. And those are sort of the elements that we focus on in terms of our approach to learning. So from a blended learning perspective, I think of it, and the reason I call it blended is, a lot of times they'll talk about, well, it's either face-to-face or it's all online learning. But there's a whole range of opportunity in between those two extremes, right? And depending on the person, depending on the organization, depending on the most critical thing, time. How much time do I really have to drive my professional development? We will optimize those delivery modalities in a blended way. And a blended, almost like a smoothie, right? As opposed to a blend of a salad where you have parts and pieces and they're all very distinct. Our blended learning model is very smooth and seamless as it goes through the transition from face-to-face to self-directed, and everything in between is blended in a way that makes sense for the learner. It's all focused on the learner first. We meet the learner where they're at, not where we think we want to be comfortable in. It's where are they comfortable in, and how can we provide that learning in that environment? And then the second question you asked was around?
It was about the academic learning. So what do you think is kind of outdated in that respect? Or what are your thoughts on the additional academic learning piece?
Well, education in the Middle Ages was the province of the church. Very few people got educated in the Middle Ages, and typically it was education around religion. When the Industrial Revolution came to be, that then became sort of the province of the state. The state said we need to educate our people, we need to give them opportunities, we need to get them ready for the workforce, for the Industrial Revolution, et cetera, et cetera. And higher education has always been more focused on preparing the person for life in general, right? A variety of skills, a general education, then you did deep specialization. But the problem with higher education now is their model is somewhat broken, because the pace of change today is so much faster than the pace of change in the early days of farming going to agriculture, right? Or agriculture going to manufacturing. So we found, that at the University of Phoenix, one of the things we focused on is getting students ready for work, because they were mostly working adults who wanted to change their careers, who want to start new careers. How do we get them ready for the workforce? And the way we did that was to have curriculum that was relevant to what they were going to be doing in their career. Not every university or higher education institution has that as a mission, but that was our mission. So, I think higher education is going through a tough time right now, because they have to decide, do I follow the path that we've had always, which is we focus on education and not necessarily bridging education to jobs, or do we go more contemporary and driving it around really focusing on that bridge from education to jobs, and more importantly, focusing on skills? Right? In the past, it's been focused on, I have a degree in this, or I have a degree in that. Now it's more focused on, I have these skills. And employers are looking now more for skills-based hiring than necessarily credentials, because they can't find enough people with the credentials anyway, because the pipeline is not big enough to fill the employment gaps and the skills gaps that are out there for employers.
I think that's interesting what you said there about the pace of change. And I feel like the nature of the job market today evolves so quickly. So how does the Academy react to these new jobs and required skills on the market?
So, that goes back to that on that BARE model that I talked about, that relevancy and that agility, right? And the agility is to be able to update the curriculum very quickly. So what we do is we make sure we're on the leading edge of what's going on in the industry, and our curriculum is continuously updated to sort of reflect that particular relevance for the job or for those technical pathways. What's interesting, we've had more change in the last year than we had in the previous 20 years. I mean, and that's just going to get more and more distressful for everybody because things are I mean, the clock accelerates so quickly, and the technology change accelerates so quickly. When I was at Oracle or even at Microsoft, we always knew when the next release of software was going to happen. We knew it was 3 years out. We had time to prepare. People had time to think about it. People had time to prepare for it. Now it's continuous release, right? Amazon changes their software every night. You don't know it because you're not looking at what are all the changes, but there's this continuous release of technology. Hence, we have to be agile in how we keep up with that and stay ahead of that. And higher education institutions, no knock on them. I mean, I worked for one that was great at doing it, but the reality is they're subject to a lot of regulations and other types of government funding and things that they just move at a little bit of a slower pace. We have to align our curriculum and our academy to the industry clock. The closer we can align to that industry clock, the more synchronized we are with them, the more relevant we are, the better the outcome for the students coming through the academy when they land in their job.
Interesting. It must be hard to kind of sometimes distinguish maybe what's a phase and a fad in the technology world versus maybe what's here to stay and actually integrate itself into the job market more permanently, perhaps.
Well, it's interesting because, we talk about, what's on the horizon, what are the next technologies and things. And I think, if you read a lot of the research reports, every research report sort of biases a little bit towards what they're interested in, what technologies they want to sort of push. But the reality is, most technologies will go through an adoption cycle where you have early adopters, and then you have the maturity curve where more adopters come on, and then eventually crosses the chasm into mainstream. Not every technology makes it through that early adopter to maturation phase because something else might supersede it, or it doesn't really come to maturation. A good example, and the UK was a big leader in this. Augmented reality and virtual reality has been around for 20 or 30 years, but not until the pandemic hit did everybody sort of say, I can't have everybody in the place where I want them to be. How do I recreate this virtually? And now the adoption of virtual reality and augmented reality and immersive technologies is pretty much going quite mainstream, including both technical skills and professional skills. So sometimes it takes a crisis and sort of that inflection point to drive it. Other times, I think people overestimate or are over optimistic around how quickly those will be adopted, versus it really always takes a little time for that to really happen, for the people to adopt it, for it to get embedded into the organizations, for people to be comfortable with it, people to be trained on how to optimize it. And so, excuse me. So if we look at, the technologies today that are being adopted, they've been around for maybe the last 3 to 5 years, but now they're really sort of gaining traction. The same thing, technologies that are coming on the horizon will probably take a little longer to get adopted, but probably less time than it took the last 5 years because things are just moving faster. And there's a lot of great technology infrastructure at companies now that they're able to absorb that. The real limitation is the human. How much change can I take, right? How much are you making me learn and learn and learn and learn? And how can I do that and still stay competent and stay really, proficient in what I'm doing? So it's a human more weakness than it is a technology adoption problem.
Interesting. I think based off, talking about technology and trends and kind of what's kind of on the horizon, if we look to the future based on your experience across the kind of education technology space, what in 5 years' time, what technologies do you think we'll be talking about at London Tech Week?
Well, I think we'll be talking about the same ones that are on the tips of everybody's tongue now, which is right. Eventually, we probably have 3 to 4 billion people on the planet that have access to the internet. In 5 years, everybody on the planet will have access to the internet. So this mobile internet and all the devices and things that are connected to the internet, right? The Internet of Things. How is everything talking to each other? I think the other thing that will be taken much more seriously, even though it's been part of the technology horizon for a while, is this whole issue around cybersecurity, right? And sort of cybersecurity has always been a little bit of an afterthought until now. In the last couple of years, all these hacks that have happened, all these breaches of data. So data security, cybersecurity, I think will become very mainstream. the use of data in much more sophisticated ways. People, the technologies are all contributing to accelerating very quickly, medical technologies, computer technologies. And so it's almost like a synergistic multiplier effect going on. So those things are going to get better and better and better and smarter. And we'll just be able to do many more things with artificial intelligence, with augmented reality. I mean, I don't think we'll ever get to the point of being like the movie The Matrix, where if I wanted, when I went to learn to be a pilot, I actually had to go to school for 4 months and do a lot of practice and be in the air. In the movie The Matrix, if you remember, when Neo wanted to learn how to fly the helicopter, they just plugged it in, downloaded a program, boom, there he was, a proficient
4 months seems pretty quick, though. That's quite good going to become a pilot.
I don't think it'll be that quick. Not
Too
in my
hard
lifetime. But I think more and more things
I understand.
are blending the virtual and real world, and how do you work in those particular mixed reality modes.
Yeah. We've spoken quite a lot about the ed tech sector, but obviously there's a lot of debates and opinion going around at the moment about the future of work and what offices will look like post-pandemic. Do you think the workforce will go back to a pre-COVID normal, or do you think we've changed forever now?
There's a lot of debate going on that, even within our own company. Many companies have already said we're going back to work in June. Obviously with the right protocols, the health protocols, and all the cautions and precautions that are needed. But I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between what the executives want to do and what the people that are actually doing all the work want to do. And I think people have gotten accustomed, both positively and negatively, to working remotely, working almost from anywhere, right? People have been moving around, and hey, if I can work from anywhere, I would rather work in a warm climate than be in the North Pole, right? Oh, I want to work for this company, and now they have remote work, so I can work there. I don't have to stay working at this company. That whole dynamic hasn't really stabilized yet. I think it'll take about a year or two, but it will never be the way it was before, where working from home was looked at primarily as a negative, because people thought, oh, people are goofing off or they're not being as productive as they are. The pandemic proved we can get stuff done. The problem is there's a different effect on the worker in terms of isolation and lack of social interaction and the water cooler talk and that sort of being with your peers and brainstorming and driving creativity. So I think what will happen is the office will be reconfigured. Some people will have to be in the office, but not 5 days a week. And maybe just working remote, but they'll have the office for special events that in the past you went offsite to do. Now I think you're going to go into the office to do those offsite events of socialization and conferences and things, but it's not going to be the same. And people have really enjoyed and have figured out how to maximize and optimize their time. And, you have to sort of say, hey, how do I make that very employee centric so that there's wellness, there's mental health wellness, there's financial wellness, and they're also getting the work done. And that's not everybody going back to work and working in the office the same way as it was before. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting how you said kind of at the beginning it was work from home, which was such a nuanced thing. And then it's actually now not gone back to, return to the office. It's more work from anywhere. Like you said, you're not chained to your house. If you have a laptop, you can work from anywhere. So that's kind of a new trend that I find really interesting. And I think also it'll be good to see, once that restriction's lifted, so you don't have to work from home, it will be interesting to see what people choose to do, I think, once you've got the choice to either work from home or work in the office, because those restrictions and the confidence has changed. So I guess we'll know once those restrictions are fully lifted, won't we? And see what kind of employees do and what they choose to do.
Well, let's take a specific segment, working moms, right? Who now had children at home, who had to manage their career, even working dads, right? They had to sort of juggle their schedule to figure out, how do I do all these things and stay productive and get my kids and they figured it all out. And then many made the decision that I'm not going to go back to work, or because my family is more important, or my kids are more important, or whatever. So there's a lot of derivative effects that are going on, that just saying, hey, we're all going to go back to work is not going to be the optimum solution, because everybody's figured out a whole different cadence to their day, and they've adjusted to that, and they figured out, I can drop the kids here, and my husband can do this, or my partner can do this, and now all of a sudden say, I got to change all that again to go back to a structure. that doesn't necessarily mean that I can be more productive or more effective. I've proven I can be productive and effective in this new structure. And by the way, I like it because I'm not spending hours in the car commuting or hours on the train or whatever. But there'll be some social aspects and things that have to happen again because people need people. But it'll be a hybrid model, much more so than either or, right? You're either working from home or you're working at the office. It'll be somewhere in between, and every company, based on their culture and their needs, will figure out where they fall on that range.
Yeah, definitely. Depending on that needing focus time or collaboration time, I think that will definitely determine whether you're at home or the office. So just to finish off, what advice do you have for business leaders to prepare and springboard their organizations in the right direction?
Don't be afraid, don't be cautious. It's here. So there's no more debating on whether there's going to be a skills gap. It's here and you need to address it because your employees and workers are figuring things out differently. So if you don't figure out how you're going to address the skills gap at your job and how you're going to address it for your internal employees and even for new employees, they're going to find an employer that has figured it out. So either you figure it out and you keep the talent that you have, or you don't figure it out and the talent that you have is going to go somewhere else and work where that has been sort of made a priority. And a lot of people now are focused on, what's the purpose of the company? Why am I working here? There's got to be a sense of purpose and sort of motivation, and this social justice and equity and climate change are all important factors for people now. They've seen it, they've reflected on it. They see how a pandemic can cause a global crisis. Look what's going on in India, right? I mean, we're not out of the woods. So they want to work for somebody who cares about them as much as they care about themselves and their family. So, they have to have empathy. They have to put the employers first, and they have to give them opportunities to skill up and reskill and develop the skills so that they can stay there. And then they also have to bring in new talent. And, how do you integrate that in and how do you drive that culturally? But it's about purpose, family, community, and, balancing all those things out. And the employers that can do that and do that effectively with authenticity are going to be the winners.
Absolutely. I think it's so important that kind of employers understand that jobs are now part of your extended self. And like you mentioned, that you do have to align with your values or there's going to be some kind of mismatch there. But thank you so much for joining me today, Dennis. I
loved it.
More of M3's work in the future. And just for the audience, if you found this conversation interesting and you want to learn more, M3 have recently developed a fantastic in-depth report on diversity, where they really unearth the causes of inequality and pinpoint opportunities to make a lasting change. So to read it, head to londonnews.tech and click on the diversity and inclusion button at the top. Thanks for listening.